Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'm Dave Merkel, CEO and one of the co-founders at Expel, and I'm excited today to be joined by Kevin Mandia. His reputation is probably well known by most of you on this webinar, but I'm definitely going to take a moment to embarrass him because that's how we roll and talk about some. Yeah, there you go, thumbs
I
up.
love being
Uh,
embarrassed. Thanks, man.
yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. Your reward for joining our board of directors, which by the way,
Yeah.
Kev has joined our board as an independent director, is to be embarrassed by me on a webinar. But before we get into that, just a couple things, and you're going to see me read some notes because I was given very strict instructions to make sure I got this correct, and the only way I can do that is read it. So a couple of housekeeping items on how we're going to be managing your questions today. Our head of the Security Operations Center, Ben Bridget, is with us today, and he'll be answering your questions in chat in real time. And Ben, say hi when you get a chance here. When you have a question, make sure you drop it into chat. If we aren't able to get to your question, we'll follow up with a blog post on expel.com for any questions we don't get to, and we'll notify you via email when it's live. And then lastly, keep an eye out for some polls. It's up to you whether you respond or not, but we'd love to hear from you. So if you could just take a second and click the shiny red button when it shows up, that would be fantastic. All right, now the embarrassing part. This is fun. All right. So, if for those of you that don't know Kev's background, he started his career in the Air Force as I did, first spending time at the Pentagon in the 7th Communications Group, and then moved over to become a special agent in the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. If you don't know what that is, if you've seen the show NCIS, it's like that, except not like that at all, but just similar agency. Every military has a federal law enforcement entity inside of it. And he was focused on computer crime investigations, and that's where we met at Bolling Air Force Base. I was in the same agency, and Kev and I worked together starting back in 1996, which that's a scary time frame to consider. Back when we didn't call it cyber, thank God, we called it information security or InfoSec, but somewhere along the way it became cyber, and we had to get with the program. Sometime after actually leaving the Air Force, he worked a number of different places, including places like Foundstone. He founded Mandiant. This was back in 2004, I think, if I've got that right, Kev.
You
And
nailed it.
everywhere I go around the world, when I say, "Oh yeah, I worked at Mandiant," like universally, everybody knows what that is. Just a premier brand for incident response, threat intelligence. Obviously, we were heavily involved in, and this was really, Kev's focus and energy, heavily involved in outing cyber attacks from China on U.S. commercial interests. We worked with the New York Times on some publicity there, published our famous APT1 report. And so he was in the middle of all of that. I think Fortune, I think their quote was, "The CEO who caught the Chinese spies red-handed," after that report was published. As I mentioned, I worked with Kev. We worked together in the Air Force, and then I was with him at Mandiant. I built his endpoint software platform. It was an early endpoint detection and response product before that acronym existed. And we also built a managed offering on top of it, which ultimately was named Managed Defense, and that was an early MDR, Managed Detection and Response. So Kev saw opportunities there before the market did, and we had a chance to work together building those things before we were acquired by FireEye at the end of 2013. I became their CTO for a time. Kev ultimately became CEO of FireEye after a couple years, I think, and then was involved in structuring those assets, moving some of the older product stack out under the FireEye brand to an external purchaser, and then the company became Mandiant again, and then was purchased by Google in 2022. Now, most recently, he's stepped away as CEO of Mandiant back in May, I believe. And now, as I mentioned, he has joined our board as an independent director. We're kind of getting the band back together. And Kev, hey, first, thanks for saying yes when I called. And, thanks for being part of the team and spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it.
I think I said yes too quick, right, Merk? You're like, "Hey, man, would you like to?" And I was like, "Yes, yes." I leaned into it, right? But
You're a tough negotiator, tough negotiator.
there was no negotiating. I'd been waiting for the call, hoping for the call, just to join the team. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Anything in there I missed, Kev, on the background, or is that all? I think I hit all
Well,
the highlights, although we could share all the goofy stories.
yeah,
Like I think we were just chatting in the warm up to this. This goofy hair is Kev's fault because we used to dare each other to do
I'm
stuff
not
back in the
sure.
Mandiant days, and I took him up on one,
I
and
blame
my
Jamie
wife liked it.
Butler for it.
What's
We'll just play random employees for it. It couldn't be my idea.
yeah,
By the way, it
sure.
made me sound like a real CEO for a second. You talked about me structuring assets.
Yeah.
I've always said I'm a cybersecurity guy first, and if I structured assets, that was just pure luck.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, an aside, and then we'll get into a
Yeah.
story or some questions. It's still funny, like when my wife Lisa, she first met you back when you were first lieutenant. We were both at bowling,
Mhm.
and you came out of the office where we both worked, and we were leaving to go out of town, and you needed sort of this last minute helter-skelter ride to
Yeah,
personnel or something across the base. And
probably.
so we kind of rearrange the car and you pile in and we chaotically drive across the base. And so she, in her mind, juxtaposes that and the Fortune magazine cover, and it cracks her up
Well,
every single time.
well, and what's worse is I think I was asking to get a ride to go get a case of beer or something like that for the weekend. God only knows where my own car was. There's probably like 2 spots in front, and I didn't want to lose my parking spot. So, thank you for accommodating my needs at that moment. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, again,
Again, I
everybody,
was 25 years old. We had our priorities back then. We worked hard, and then the weekend came. So,
that's right. Yeah. And now we just take naps. So yeah.
yeah.
All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and get into some questions here. And again, pop questions into the chat if you'd like, and Ben B will be all over it. So so we go way back, and we've seen the industry change a lot in that time frame. Um, Obviously, the market around managed security has changed a
Yeah.
ton. Well, and security in general, both the do-it-yourself mindset, outsourcing offerings, that's been through a couple of iterations now. And as you've seen those different phases
Mhm.
of how customers solve their problems, from solving
Right.
themselves to MSSPs now to MDR, what do you see as sort of the biggest changes along that journey? And that could be changes for the customer, for the solution provider, or for the threat.
So, Merk, we could spend the whole time talking about this because I can tell you when we started the company and you came on board in February of 2006, the future was clear. Like I know you felt it too. We knew exactly what we had to build. We saw the exact needs and we knew how to execute it. If you read our endpoint, and by the way, not many people realize Mandiant really was an endpoint company, but we were self-funded and we had believed that responding to every breach was strategically important. Like, I don't know how you build security software without responding to breaches and figuring out where's your software end and the bad guys' successes. Where's the end of the Maginot line in security? So we had a strong premise. You respond to every breach that matters, and then build an endpoint technology to detect what the other technologies missed. And in hindsight, we probably would have done it different, maybe raise some money and professionalize how we had to do it. But we were just like guerrilla warfare every day. We budgeted the profitability, and we could afford to do that because we had laser clarity. And where I was going with that, Merck, is if we brought up the requirements you had for your endpoint, it's as true today as it was 25 years ago. We had the right roadmap, the right game plan, probably lacked the resources to do it. And maybe our approach wasn't quite, we weren't a pure product company. We were doing so many different things that we had the struggles of identity sometimes between pure product versus product plus services and how that works for sales and go to market and partnerships and those sort of complexities. So getting to your question of how has it changed, oh, it was real obvious what needed to be built in 98 through, really till CrowdStrike built the endpoint that people need or Sentinel-1 built it. And making a modern endpoint that can adapt very, very quickly to newer threats. That's kind of what was necessary. And we couldn't have something like a Symantec or a McAfee that they just couldn't defend you. And I remember when we were responding to breaches, Merck, we were right away when we were responding to APT1, because we had clever names. Let's just call it one.
Yeah.
There you go. That's how
What's the
creative we
next
were.
one? Two.
Two. Let's go by one, and we'll make it two. And maybe we should have just done all Fibonacci numbers or something like that and been cool. But no, we just went one, two, three. And but when we were responding to APT1, we were responding to breaches and seeing malware that it took 18 months literally before McAfee triggered on it finally. Isn't that amazing? We were 18 months ahead of the AV companies because they were fundamentally flawed in how they learned. Basically, bad guys would break in, they would install malware, and someone else had to find it and then submit it to McAfee for McAfee to go, oh, okay, there's something new that we have to detect. So, long story made short, getting back to your question, with clarity, we saw the future. Now, things are changing now faster than ever before, Merck. So, to me, 3 years out, what is it? I think I know what customers want, but the path on how to deliver that is a little bit different based on the shift change because of AI. Where I think it's advantageous to expel is that I think companies that already have the data are uniquely advantaged to build better models and better learning systems with that security relevant data to better defend their customers. In other words, your network effect of having the protection mission for thousands of customers, that knowledge and network effect will benefit you from all the folks that are thinking, oh, I'll get into security today and I'll build something new, a new mousetrap that's going to solve all the problems. I think the problems will be solved by the companies that have unique data, can write learning systems on top of that data like Expel, and then provide more rapid defense. What every security professional's always wanted to buy, though, is, hey, I feel confident my organization is safe in cyberspace. And how do you get that? Just you have a defense, however you do it, with technology and people and your processes. You have an organization that just hasn't suffered an impactful breach in years, and you've had a cadence of red teaming or a cadence of live fire drills, whatever they may be, where you recognize, hey, we're competent at this, we're good at this. So that's the longest answer I've given to any question I've ever gotten. So right now, Merck's like, I don't want to ask another question, but hey,
Uh,
yeah, I'll
I'll,
shorten from that. So what's
I'll ask a
changed?
shorter one
The
as a
people
follow-up.
want
How
the
about that?
same thing. How you're going to deliver it will change because technology is going through the AI shift change.
So just to follow up to that,
Yeah.
to hone in just a piece of it. Uh, so when you first said, "Hey,
Hmm.
we've got our consultants, cool.
Yeah.
We've got an endpoint platform, cool." You saw a persistent problem in the market that led you down the path of what ultimately would become MDR. Like, what were the key factors there that made you go, "This is not a problem people can solve on their own"?
Yeah. It's Merck. There's a lot of ways to explain it, but I think the easiest way is this: if you were taking a calculus test with 50 people that didn't know calculus, throwing more people at it isn't going to help get you a better test score. You need a calculus expert to nail it. In security, one expert is often worth infinite non-experts. I mean, you can't make up the delta. And a lot of companies lack the expertise to find if Chinese cyber espionage had broken into their networks. Now they could go out and try to hire it or train to it, but it was just simpler to give them that talent and really leverage the endpoint technology that we already had. I don't think any organization, no CEO wakes up every day, Merck, and goes, today my top priority is cyber defense for my organization. They're thinking, how do I do my business and deliver the results that I need to execute to? And cybersecurity is something they care about, but it's not their core business the majority of the time. And so they're not, and they don't even have the capability to know, do I have a talented CISO? Can that talented CISO hire talented people? Very few CEOs have the technical competence to observe their CISO over time and get comfortable with their tech, that they're a good technologist and making the right choices. So that's another long-winded answer to say most companies lack the expertise, and where Expel can give tremendous benefit is we've got cybersecurity experts that every day are confronted with challenges so that you don't have to deal with those challenges. And I'll give you another one. If you are an expert in cybersecurity and you get hired by a bank or you get hired by the defense industrial base, two industries that do have real threats every day, over time, if you're not an expert being deployed to deal with incidents and high complex things, you get bored, you think you're atrophying, and you just move on. So the staffing of great people in cyber is very complicated unless those people are constantly challenged with something new.
Yeah, uh, the old operators want to operate sort
Yeah,
of sort of adage, and if they don't get that opportunity, then hanging on to
yeah.
them at any price is very, very difficult.
The homeostases of running security operations, Dave, what I've found is the best cybersecurity experts over time, that's boring for them. It's like the doldrums, and they don't want to do it. They like setting up programs. They like getting a security operations center that works. Um, but once everything's up and running and efficient and effective, they're done.
Yeah.
And that's why it makes more sense and has always made more sense to me to have a, a managed defense, basically. And you remember when Grady was working with us, and you did this too, actually, the whole analogy of every company needs cybersecurity. Why do they go about it alone, uniquely alone?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then we always likened it back to energy in 1900 and Thomas Edison, where General Electric decided we'll build energy for every company so that you don't have to have every company building right on the river so they could have the turn wheel and the electricity to run. I always felt cybersecurity was like a utility. It's just more expertise required to deliver it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and fairly dynamic expertise as
Yeah.
well. Which let me I'll move us forward to another question. This will probably play in. So I'm going to ask you sort of two parts. The first part is the inevitable threat question.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here we are in 2024, right? And another election year, which I'm sure will bring
Mhm.
many interesting outcomes. Um, what do you see over the next, call it, couple 3 years from a threat standpoint? Kind of where's the world today, and where do you think organizations need to be looking in terms of what the bad guys are going to do next?
Merk, we've said it since you joined law enforcement and I joined law enforcement. We always knew instinctively there's a certain percentage of people that are going to commit crimes, right? Whatever that is, until everybody's wealthy and everybody has whatever they want. Sometimes you have the have and have nots, and you have people executing criminal element to make money. So I always say wherever money goes, crime follows. We have a digital economy today. Wherever information communications go, you're going to have espionage and the warfighter go. Wherever command and control is, you're going to have the warfighter go there. And over time, what you start realizing is bad actors or espionage or warfare is all going to be conducted in the cyber domain. And we have no international rules of engagement that say, hey, here's how you play fair and here's how you don't. We don't have an agreed upon way to do it. And then there's asymmetries. And so you have North Korea, Russia, they've recognized from a criminal element, they're in safe harbors, and you can rob from 10,000 miles away. So you go through, age old problems. Espionage existed for as long as humans have been around and nations were formed. Crime has existed for as long as, human history. These things aren't going away. There will always be a cyber offense because of this. So you have world peace, no ideological differences, and nobody committing crime. You will have cyber attacks. And that's it. So now that you know you're going to be attacked, it gets a little bit more complicated that you can attack with no deterrence or very little deterrence on you, because of the safe harbors. So attacks are absolutely going to continue. And what we're witnessing, and we all know this, software is something that evolves. Right now, there's 20 people working in a VC basement off Sand Hill Road. This is all hypothetical, but it happens all the time. Building an application that 5 people use today and 400 million use next year. What happens if it's built and it has a vulnerability in it? All of us are suddenly worrying about the next vulnerability injected into our ecosystem. And what complicates vulnerabilities and why software scanning is hard is that we've had whole years, Merk, where the 0 day wasn't a vulnerability, but a feature. Like the olden days where compressed HTML in Windows would execute executables. That's a feature. You have this compiled HTML and you're visiting a website. It was a feature that it could execute portable executable files. And people that had malignant or malicious intent took advantage of it. So the future holds much of the same. You're going to see criminal actors doing what they do. You're going to see espionage continue. And all we really do is, I've referred to the Maginot line, we're constantly shifting, what OSs they can target more frequently, what apps are a little more vulnerable, what identity platforms are less effective or harder to maintain. And then every single defender out there, all the blue teams out there, Merk, are thinking, we're working hard, but it's so hard to pitch that perfect game. Like imagine the scenario of, hey, Log4j comes out, and that day we just happen to have 2 employees sick, and there are normal people that scan and patch. I mean, there's so many just human challenges that affect our perfect execution on defense. I've always, you know, do you remember when we founded Mandia in 2004, we had the phrase security breaches are inevitable. And
Yep.
we said that I think before anybody did. And I don't even know, I think I believed it at the time, but I didn't know how right we were when we said that. We said security breaches are inevitable. Now 30 years in cybersecurity, I do believe they're inevitable. And it doesn't mean that's a bad thing. You can eat right, exercise, get a cold. Cancer is a complex disease. We've known about it for 3,000 years. We haven't cured it. I kind of look at the cyber domain the very same way. What you have to have, and what we aspire to in cyber defense, is you can learn fast, think fast, be agile, and apply an aggressive defense when necessary. So every question you've asked, I could answer with a one-liner, but because we had 40 minutes, you're getting to 3 minutes. In my career, the apps change, but the attacks and what the people that are the threat actors are trying to do hasn't changed. And then I guess I'd leave it with this. There's more impact when there's a successful breach than ever before. So cybersecurity's importance is going up and to the right every single day. If you're hacked today and you know it, the costs are higher, the risks are higher, the impact to your business is higher. And you know that I could speak about that the whole, you know, webinar. So let's not do that, Merk.
Well,
Yeah.
we will stipulate that that is true for purposes
Yeah.
of this conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough. Fair enough. So now let me switch to thinking about the MDR space, not necessarily Expel specifically, but hey,
Mhm.
MDRs. Like if this is all true in the context of, you know, threats over, call it the next 3 years, I find it hard to think about like 5 years out. It's just too far
Mhm.
away to contemplate. Like, what do you see as, you know, primary challenges in that market for
Sure.
providers and for customers in terms of them, you know, picking the right provider to match their needs?
Well, you went right at it. Like I've always felt, well, let me take a step back and then get to how do you pick the right provider. I've always felt you're either in the controls space, I make endpoint protection products, or I make firewalls or network security monitoring products, or I make identity security products, or you should be in the monitoring space. And I've always felt it's kind of like the fox guarding the hen house when you're in the control space and saying, but hey, we've got this too. We're going to manage it all for you. I do realize that customers do like to buy products and not have to hire to run them. So there's a lot of popular services where we bought an endpoint and they run it for us. And Merck, we did that, right? At Mandia. People would buy our endpoint and say, you run it for us. But we were trying to deliver an outcome. But Mandiant was always, and even I personally have always felt there's a lot of industrial logic in saying, here's our security controls. So let's make sure we audit them, not with those people. You know, you have to have a
Right.
separate group or a separate team and even a separate technology to do it. So I always felt that the future of cybersecurity, if you look at all the product companies and all the services companies, over time, it would mold into what CISOs and CEOs want to buy, which is I want to buy a subscription to the outcome that I feel secure and I have an aggressive security program. And they don't want to set it up themselves, Merk. I've always believed that. It's I wouldn't have wanted to do it. You like the third party risk transfer of I'm relying on Expel to do this, or I'm relying on a partner to provide it. You feel confident that partner can do it because you've red teamed and you've kind of tested them. And you can buy as a customer any tech you want, but you don't get locked into that one tech product company's services to protect you. So, and I think that is the future. I think MDR will continue to grow because I think it's what CISOs want to buy. It's just we're at a time where CISOs have bought endpoint, bought network, bought kind of these managed programs with different technologies. And it takes years sometimes for them to get out of certain contractual relationships to end with the package they want, which is I have 22 different technologies and I have this MDR provider managing the outcomes I want with those technologies. Here's where it gets complex today, Merck. It's a crowded space to some extent. You know, you've got a lot of different 100 million plus managed defense kind of companies or MDR companies. And it's always been a fragmented space. I remember when we started doing managed defense in late 2009 at Mandiant, the largest shareholder in that was IBM with 4% of the market. So it's always been a fragmented market. It's always been offered by a lot of folks. And yet it is a market where the more customers you have and the more problems you solve, the greater the capability of your defense becomes. So it is sort of a land grab space. Like if you have 4,000 customers versus 30,000, again, you need the right customers, like more similar customers. Maybe 1A enterprise requires a different kind of defense than a small law firm in Topeka, Kansas. But it is one of those things where you get better intel and better capabilities, better scale, better financial results with more customers. And then I'll just leave you with this. The biggest challenge that we will have at Expel and what I hope to help with is how do you differentiate when you have buyers that when they're looking for managed help and a delivered outcome may not have the expertise to tell an A from a B, from a C, from a D. And if we can have a crisp, bright line way of showing them, here's how you measure and know you're getting an A versus, and what questions to ask to make sure you're not getting a D, that's helpful.
Yeah, and I guess I'll try a statement. You can tell me if you agree with this. As the product landscape and the attack surface continue to change, which they will continue forever to change, and therefore it's always sort of a complicated mix of both what you protect and the technologies. Perceiving what works and what doesn't is even harder because it's more and more complicated.
Yeah, I think so. It's first off, there's way more systems out today than ever before. There's way more supply chain dependence today than ever before. I think there's way more deployment of technologies that people don't fully grok or understand than ever before. And then there's deployment of technologies. There's probably the least amount of feature use by the consumers of these technologies now as well. But combine that, the complexities of defense are going up. Combine that with the impact of attack is more fruitful. If you're doing espionage, the cyber domain proved out to be the right domain to operate in. It just did. It's why risk agents on the field when you can steal email and steal text messages from 8,000 miles away. That's easier to do. Or even if it's harder to do, it's less risk. And the same with the criminal element, Merk. So now you've just got, I think, more of an offensive push. Every modern nation is figuring out what's our cyber offense going to be and what are the rules of engagement, for it. Like, where's the line? And then you go to the criminal element and its gloves are off. I mean, it's getting more global. Like in our career, Merk and I think we were good agents. If you hacked from the United States and extorted a company, Merk, I think we got those people. We used to catch them. And it's gotten just more anonymity on the internet. There are folks now in the US, in Canada, in the democratized Western hemisphere, actively extorting US companies and our customers, and it's just getting harder to stop it. So more complexity for the blue team, more motivation and refund and funding and resources for the red team out there.
Yeah.
That sounds gloomy, but we're actually doing better on defense too.
Well, let's do this. I'm going to ask sort of a one more gloom and doom question, but then I want to talk about where are you optimistic. But first gloom and doom. So you mentioned one thing in particular that I think is a part of basically everybody's reality today, whether they realize it or not. It's their own supply chain, or they are part of a supply chain, whether they realize it or they're not. And so there's some expanded risk associated with that, either to a company and its suppliers, or to a supplier because they're a cog in a much more important wheel than they realize. Right. And I'm just curious how that seems to me like that's one of those things that's just going to continue to get more and more complicated and not less. But I'm curious on your perspective.
Merk, I think we're building software that can learn and think. And when it learns and thinks, it's going to start using components you may not even predict it will use before it starts using them. I mean, I literally think we're building a system of systems now at many organizations, because what will happen is, I ran a company and I remember trying to figure out what our supply chain was. I was shocked at how complicated it was, because first I asked every business line owner, hey, who are the partners you depend on? And we got a list of like 10 names. Then I went to our CFO and said, who do we pay? And we got a list of 1,700 names. Yeah. So I'm like, what's right, 10 or 1,700? And then we started looking at the software we depended on, and we have no idea what their dependencies were. And they would depend on companies that depended on companies that depended on companies. And that's what you went to.
Right.
It's like an end tier system that it's really hard to know where it ended, and that's what we're living with today in a cloud operated environment where folks are relying on third party providers in the supply chain. So it's funny because when I'm in a boardroom talking to board members now at many of the companies that have suffered breaches or pre-breach, they just want to know what can we be doing. Every single company is like, we want to make sure we ship secure systems and secure software. And we start going through, here's the 27 products and the 9 processes. Like, it's unbelievable what we try to
Yeah.
go through to ship secure code. We had 8 lines, we had 8 business lines at FireEye when we were about $1 billion in revenue. We were selling 8 different things, and we never intended to ship insecure code. We had every product you could buy to check the source code, do dynamic inspection. We red teamed it. And during my tenure, we still had some vulnerabilities in it. And, I look at Microsoft and I look at Google. We don't want to ship vulnerable code, but it's virtually impossible to create bug-free code. And it's virtually impossible to ship something like an operating system when you have no idea what hardware people are going to jam it into or who's going to use it for what, that you're not going to run into some kind of race condition or some kind of problem. So that's a long-winded way of saying, you saw what happened with the CrowdStrike update, right? Where you have a system that can bring down a lot of things. I think that's something that will happen every 5 to 10 years, and it'll be critical for us to be able to recover from that.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
at this point, Merk, the team at Expel is like, can we really win then? There's all these complexities, but that just shows you the need for Expel. That's all it does.
Well,
Winning,
let's
winning's
go to
not
the optimism part of it. So
yeah.
for defenders, just generally, where do you see bright spots?
Well, the first thing I'll tell defenders, not necessarily bright spot, and that's why we always had uplifting keynotes at the end of our conferences, Merk,
So everybody goes home not
because
depressed.
we're like, hey, we get the beat down. Listen, there is no, when you're playing goalie on defense, there is actually no winning. It's the constant effort. It's knowing you are doing the best you can possibly do with what you've got. And that's what matters most, that continued vigilance, the constant battle. It doesn't go away. It's like you can't wake up one day and go, well, we got the security problem licked. Thank God we're good for 10 years. It's constant. And that's fatiguing unless you have a mindset of just recognizing winning is the effort and the capability that you apply every day. And that's the best you can do. The optimism that I've got, I've always felt what's always been important to me anyway, very personally, is attribution for who's doing it. I do think it matters. And very early on in my career, I felt it mattered that you can't just have technology as a solution or processes and people as solutions to the problem. You have to create risk for the adversaries that are doing this, whether it be policy risk in that we catch espionage and we publish articles about it and work with governments so that you can hold nations accountable for what they're doing. And on the criminal side, you got to catch people. So I do feel that all of us in the cyber security realm, the best deterrence isn't building, oh, we've got better rules and we detect lateral movement faster. It's actually grabbing the human that's doing it and stopping them, through due process. So I think internationally we can do a lot better there. We'll always have safe harbors, but I think the experience for the citizens in those nations that are safe harbors for cybercrime is going to get pretty restricted over time. So that's my optimism.
Yeah,
We can
I'll
make
take
a
it.
huge difference if we work with law enforcement on some attribution. It's because if you can get the person to stop, you're probably saving 300 downstream victims over the next few years.
Yeah, yeah, make them put some skin in the game. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, let's see. I'll watch the time here. I'd like to ask maybe just two more.
sure.
I would be it would be remiss of me to have you on here and not, point out, obviously, you've been part of some of the biggest cybersecurity incidents in history.
Right.
So for, security leaders in the audience, any sort of, and again, this could be probably 2 hours of a talk, but can
Sure.
you give me 2 minutes?
I will make it 30 seconds, Merk.
Okay, it can be a little longer than that, but so for those leaders that are thinking, "What if I get breached?" Like, what's some of the best advice you could give them in navigating a crisis, keeping teams focused under pressure, just managing in that moment?
First thing I would say to anyone that wants to make sure they're prepared for breach, do the tabletop with your executives and reenact a genuine worst case scenario. Make it bad. Make the CEO think. Make external counsel, if they're involved, really think. For example, lose your CFO's uh, email in the breach, or lose general counsel's email in the breach. Simulate what you would do, how you'd communicate, how transparent you'd be, because that'll show you your written and unwritten policies. And it'll get executives to really think, oh man, if this happens, what are we going to do? How would we do that? You have to entertain worst case and plan for worst case scenarios, because you can always do that way. When it's not worst case, trust me, it's easier to handle. And then recognize the Merk. It's not necessarily should sound defeatist, but recognize if you're breaching, you know it. It's very probable the world's going to know it at about the same time nowadays, depending on the actor, and that no matter what you do, you're going to get third party inspection. So I would do the little things that withstand third party inspection ahead of time. I would red team my networks ahead of time and see how effective we withstand a restrictive team. You don't let people try to hack you for 30 straight days. You say, listen, I'm going to give you user level access to my network, and you have a red team test you for 3 days and see what they can do, and learn from that and prioritize from that. So that's it. Tabletop and red team ahead of time. And probably a third thing and last thing, test your resilience if you can. Make sure here's our 110 critical systems based on the 50 top customers and our top revenue generation, or the people that use it, whatever. There's like 6 or 7 criteria to identify your crown jewels. Know they're backed up, know your backups are secured, know that you can recover them, know that you can recover your Active Directory and your architecture so that you can run. And then maybe even in some industries, learn how to execute your business off the grid if that's what it takes. Because then when the incident happens, you can immediately diminish its impact by saying we're still taking orders at the restaurant, or we're still serving energy to our customers. We're just not doing it the way we did it yesterday. We can't do that now. That's all. So.
No, definitely good advice. If
Yeah.
the first time you're thinking about the incident is the day it happens, probably not a good day. So,
No.
yeah.
Well, Merk, I went through one. I mean, I literally got that Friday afternoon phone call where in about the first 5 minutes of call, I recognized, oh, this is the one I've been worried about. And thankfully, yeah.
And
And
it's
I
always a
learned,
Friday. It's
yeah,
always a
it
Friday.
is a Friday. It seems that way. And I remember thinking, I'm like 1 hour from the weekend, and I was exhausted from that week. We had just taken a Blackstone inbound funding. So I've lived it and I know what it's like. And you do have to stay calm. You just have to deal with it. Like, and I think that was my whole career. I've always dealt with things like, here's my checklist. And what made me feel good is just checking things off the list. Very much the same thing during a breach. You can't have a temperament that goes way up and way down. It's that bedside manner of just saying, what do we have to do? And let's just do it as best and as fast as we can. And that'll get you through it. And crisis does help CISOs in many ways, because a lot of times there's not a sense of urgency in IT departments or a sense of urgency at companies till they get that victim mindset and go, okay, that's not going to happen again. Mike Tyson just hit me in the face. Doesn't feel good. So we're gonna put gloves on and start blocking a little bit. If you have a major breach, or you have a red team that breaks in and you're a CISO and it doesn't energize the company, you should become a CISO at a different entity at that point.
Yeah, ride the wave of those failure moments to make it better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, one last one here. So you're part of the venture firm Ballistic Ventures,
Sure.
and so based on just this talk track of what you
Mhm.
see in the future and what's interesting and where do you see problems, what are you thinking about, that's interesting in the space as a cybersecurity investor, and how do you think about teams when someone's pitching you on something? Like what are the things that get you leaning forward?
Well, I can't say I think like the traditional VC just yet, Dave, because you remember we didn't have funding. So we budgeted the profitability, which was interesting. And, but I can tell you, teams matter more than the idea. But when you have like really smart people that are great at what they do, that are passionate, that can execute in a room, they can out, in general, small can out execute big. They can just be laser focused on very narrow problems that need to be solved. What I've enjoyed being part of Ballistic is, we founded a company, Merk. It's you've lived it. there's nowhere to hide. And I love that energy. Everybody has 2.5 day jobs. That's a good thing. It makes everyone broader, everybody better, period, in the workforce. Whereas you go to a big company, you find out point 0.3 of a job because there's somebody in every single lane. And I've lived so many examples. I've been bought twice. I know what it's like to be small, bought by bigger, and then medium, bought by Google. And there's nothing wrong with the bigs other than it's just everybody's just laser focused and goes way deep. So I love the nimbleness, and I love the exuberance, the spirit of that entrepreneur that comes in and briefs us. So I get briefings every Monday is our brief day, and it's just a wonderful experience. And a lot of times, Merk, they don't know how hard it is. So you get to smirk and go, they're like, for the next 3 years, we're going to do this, and then we're good to go. And I'm like, 3 years? You don't put a time on it, and get ready to eat a lot of sandwiches in the office because there's no way out. So I love the spirit of the entrepreneurs. I do believe that because you have attackers innovating at speed in tiny little cells, that it always made sense to me that on the blue team side, you need the same thing. Great defenders that are passionate, mission based, just ripping into problems. We have identity challenges. Every identity architecture is so hard to manage at large organizations. Every multi-cloud architecture, every company that innovates, they don't want to decrease their spirit of innovation. So they have these engineers that just pop up AWS servers or Google servers all over the place. And not really, security is important to them, but it's not the first thing they're thinking. They're thinking, how do I go to market faster? How do I create this feature that everybody's going to love? So they're well intentioned, but you have all this dynamic spread of technology at every company that's innovating that just makes it harder to secure. So I'm looking for those startups that can help make that easier. We're all running, 1A enterprises running 50 to 70 security tools. And I just felt like a great startup can say, you don't need these 4 things anymore. We can do all of it. So anyway, that's a fast answer for me, Merk, but I love the
That
spirit.
was a good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
the first thing you said there resonated. I've heard that a couple of times where the team and
Yeah.
their track record and then their energy is sort of the litmus test that gets you in the door. And then we'll see about the idea that resonates. And plenty of problems to solve in our space, no question. Excellent. Well, Kev, hey, first, thank you for being here
Sure.
today. Really, really appreciate the time. And for everybody that joined us, thank you for being here. I hope we've had a chance to answer your questions. If not, please contact the team. We'll make sure to get back to you, whether that's directly or following up with a blog post. And thank you all again. We'll hopefully see you all again sometime soon. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.